Nicotine 2 made a video on discourse. I have some comments on it, somewhat in reply, but also just inspired by. The Well, first of all, it's laudable that nicotine has figured out this formula that's in use on the internet, and certainly in the atheist community. Of you find a moron, you try to demolish them with your version of the facts and pat yourself in the back, right? And that this is a bad habit. And now he says that it's not worth his time. I think that's wrong. And that mistake is probably why he comes into, well, we shouldn't have the ponage style dominate, but there might be a role for it. There is a role, in a sense, for this kind of intellectual contest, but at any rate, I don't think he went into the fact that when you do this on the other side, they're doing the same thing. I mean, you might think you've demolished them, but they do their young earth stuff, and their side cheers as well. I don't know, do you want to have an applause meter or something for a contest like that to determine who won? But anyway, it's laudable he's figured this out and wants to step out of it. Also, the fact that he realizes that when you recover from this sort of habit, you have a tendency to take on proxies, So you decide, I'm not going to go after the idiots of this type, but you try to find an idiot of another type. Now, in a deep philosophical connection, this is why I'm against metaphysics. I think metaphysics and all argumentation in favor of absolutes and certainty are sort of subversively always uh, uh, in support of this kind of habit of demonizing contradictions to your own deified truths, right? It's interesting that he went on to drawing the relation between the natural sciences and everything else in philosophy, politics, and so on. Because this is really just by coincidence, I guess. It happens to be the whole motivation of my philosophy, what I'm interested in about philosophy and why I keep interested in it. My first philosophical thoughts. Well, there's more than one contributing genealogy, right? But certainly, I think a very, very formative line of them. And I remember an example. Anyway, these first formative thoughts were about natural philosophy. Okay, and I remember a first example is a pamphlet I read on momentum. And I remember thinking it was for older kids and stuff, and I think it must have been, third or fifth grade level or something like this. And I was reading it early. I think it would have been first grade, and I was a year young, so that would have made me 6. And what was interesting to me about it is not only to describe momentum, which itself is a beautiful, sublime thing, because as I say, I always like nature, but what is that for a modern kid? Going camping, you go in nature. What is nature? It's all these living things, the forest, maybe a flowing river, and again, all the living things there. And something like momentum is sublime because it's there, it's a part of nature, but it's just sublimely embedded in the whole experience. So getting an idea of what momentum is and the role it plays in understanding nature and modeling nature is itself awesome. But the pamphlet also went into other theories that had been proposed. For example, there was an idea that it might be aerodynamics. When you throw a ball and it pushes the air out of the way and the air whips around, maybe it whips around behind and pushes it, right? So it takes a while for it to run out of energy because it recoups some. Perfectly fine theory. And so this was very formative because it really went into the process of scientific thinking. And it went into this process of continual updating of ideas. And you could see when you study the history of science, like I have seen, that there's a lot of very reasonable assumptions if you can get your head set at where it was then. Or even now, we have so many intuitions that we have allowed to persist that don't match our theory of material reality, that even now, something like thinking that the sun goes around the earth, we have a pretty good intuitive grasp of how that feels, even though we know better. Um, so this is a big part of science. And when I went to college, my mother told me I could do anything but philosophy. But I worked my own way through college. I paid for myself, so I realized I could do whatever the hell I want. But I did initially go for physics. I thought I'd get a physics degree. I never intended to work in physics or be a physicist. I figured I would become a writer. That was more of the idea. But I became attracted more and more to philosophy, and the reason was clear. I had thought that scientists invented logic, maybe mathematicians or a combination thereof, right? And lo and behold, it was a non-controversial fact of history that philosophers did. And not only had they historically invented it, like you can argue about natural sciences, but they were still the caretakers of it. It was still the philosophers, and is still right now the philosophers that update and improve and work in logic. So really they are the caretakers of logic. That's the sociological service of philosophy as a subculture, as a group of people maintaining something for the culture. They maintain logic, and so basically the core group of philosophers in terms of who to be thankful for the service they give are the philologists and the logicians. So that attracted me to philosophy, because this is really what the philosophical contribution is. But I never left my basic orientation about physics and learning about things like momentum and whatnot. It's the same as going camping and learning about roly-poly bugs or whatever. It's an extension. It's more sublime. There's a beautiful ethereal and eureka-inducing feeling. It wanders through just wonderfully comfortable confusions and washes of ideas of various patterns and semi-perceptibility to focus in on these concepts like momentum, which are really so powerful that they bring clarity to the whole process. And I agree in trying to draw the metaphors from nature at all levels, from the organic web of life that you sort of directly experience if you spend time in nature, to the more subtle physical models, things like momentum and stuff that you can discern with a keen eye and a sense of an appropriate sense of abstraction and how you do abstractions. And I would like to draw metaphors from all along that lessons, from all along our understanding of nature, and apply them to all philosophy. And I do that. That's why I believe in calling the relativism, a physical relativism, associating relativism to general relativity and so on, to discard a notion, a history, say, of moral relativism that's drawn from some other realm, really. And when we discuss relativism, to discuss physical relativism, so that in philosophy, the sense of the word relativism is compatible with the sense in physical relativism. Because I want to draw these kinds of metaphors and apply them to politics and whatnot. Also in biology, I mean, politically, really, we need to draw more metaphors from how biological systems work. Organisms, see, they're actual cooperations of billions of people. We're here with a society that's just full of crime and killing. We want to say, is it possible to have a cooperation of this many people? Well, each of us is such a cooperation. We need to draw from the physical reality of how that cooperation works and apply it organistically and metaphorically to our society. And it'll be a lot better because, in our society where you have the cream of the crop and the oppression and the wealth and the way all of that works, that's nothing like it works in these organisms. In the organism, the brain will get extra oxygen compared to the rest of the body only in a crisis. When there's plenty, everybody gets plenty. So, and our societies obviously don't work that way. So there's physical lessons from all of the natural sciences where you look empirically and perceptively into nature to get your ideas and your abstractions that you then apply. So, yeah, I'm glad nicotine has this attitude. I see people come up with this kind of attitude, and it's difficult because they're using that formula. People will demand it of them. They will want the kind of automatic feedback. They know how to do something that gets a certain kind of feedback. But still, it's no doubt about it. It's a productive realization, and then it's accurate. I mean, that's the formula, and also that's what makes some of us atheists in no way ever, after 4 years in my case, part of the atheist community, because I'm not going to do that. And I especially am bothered of the more intellectual types that do it, like Thunderfoot, that, because it's like, if you're going to have this street match, ponage, brawling kind of, let me find an idiot to ridicule and point at kind of approach, I mean, that seems appropriate if there's just two people kind of, it's like if two derelicts in the street are arguing that way, you could say, yeah, that's a productive part of the conversation. But, if somebody takes a pretense of intellectualism and then engages in that, there's something, well, I don't know, an unhealthy mixture of ingredients, an unhealthy hybrid, a dysfunctional and counterproductive hybrid of two approaches, which in their own way might be okay. So, okay, all right, new philosophy requires new language.